Iowa football gets their first commitment in over a month. That's great news. Better news, who they beat to get the three-star tight end. We'll talk about that. Iowa football recruiting. Plus, it's a Throwback Thursday. A look back at great teams here throughout the summer in Iowa sports history. It's a busy one all today on Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you get your podcasts, Google, Stitcher, Apple, wherever it may be, Spotify, you name it, we are there. And you can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you give us a subscribe. Just click that button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege, and they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Let's get into it here today. And it had been a dry spell for Iowa football as it pertains to the recruiting world. We talked about last week, Iowa had their big event inviting the class of 2025 in, offered a number of prospects, guys that maybe we felt there were going to be commitments for the guys that are getting ready for their junior campaign. The incoming senior class, though, 2024, grew by a member today as Iowa picked up a commitment from Michael Bird. So Michael Bird is a three-star tight end from over in Omaha. But the best news about that is Iowa beating out Nebraska for his services. Look, we look over there at Nebraska, and after they finally got the Hawkeyes for the first time in 8 years a season ago and ended Iowa's chances of getting in to the Big Ten championship game, there were frustrations, but maybe it did raise up the level a little bit. Now, I'm going to guess I'm not alone wondering if Iowa would have got to that championship game, how ugly it could have been against Michigan with the way the offense was playing. But we will never know, and maybe something good for the Cornhuskers. But there is no more Scott Frost. Frosty the coach man is no more, and that means they now have Matt Rule. Matt Rule did something unthinkable at Temple. He made them competent. I think people sometimes forget how poorly Temple football was looked at. This is a program that was kicked out of the Big East back when the Big East, yes, had football. Sorry, youngsters. Yeah, that was a real thing that happened. They had a bid to the BCS, all kinds of things. That's how UConn got a bid into the BCS where they played in the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma. But he got them respectable after pulling them out of the doldrums that they were. An incredibly difficult place to win. They play in a stadium that does not make any sense for them, and he made them good and got them to bowl games. And then he goes down to Baylor. And after the fiasco that they went through with the Art Briles situation, and he pulled them back up and built that program into a very good one. Look, it didn't work in Carolina, but we know as a college coach, he is very good. As a kid in their state borders, as a kid that they wanted, and Iowa went into Omaha and got that. The last time that Iowa got a player from Omaha, a tight end prospect that Nebraska wanted, it worked out pretty well, right? With Noah Fant. Let's hope the same thing happens here with Michael Bird. Michael Bird, 6'6", 220 pounds. He is a willing blocker, still has plenty of work to do, though, to become that inline tight end. He is a guy that, though, high points the ball incredibly well, makes a lot of catches in traffic. Watching the film, one thing that jumps out at times, his quarterback didn't give him a whole lot of help there, and he made a lot of very difficult catches in a lot of traffic in places that normally the football isn't going to be. Excited about this one. Now, there is some other news in the recruiting world that is a little bit frustrating, and that is Eric Carner, another one of the tight ends that they were after, also made a commitment today. Unfortunately, it was not the University of Iowa. We've talked about Eric Carner's background, kid that was committed to Purdue, decided to reopen his recruiting, and then he was getting offers from all over the place, from Florida to Alabama, Texas A&M, Michigan State, Iowa. Those were his 5 finalists. And with Matt Bowen, the former Hawkeye, NFL player, and now coaching at his high school, there was hope that maybe that was going to help things out a little bit. And obviously the conversations that Matt Bowen could have, a guy that was part of the transition from Hayden Fry into the Kirk Ferentz era. I've had an opportunity to talk to Matt a number of times throughout the year on radio, a guy that still loves the University of Iowa. but he also wasn't going to push him, and it wasn't going to be anything where it was going to be forceful. And we understood that, but every little bit helps. Well, this morning he took the offer and probably the bag from Texas A&M. Look, the Swarm Collective is doing a great job, but there are certain programs out there, at least financially, that Iowa cannot compete with. And certainly Texas A&M is one of those programs. Eric Harner, this is not about money for him. This is about fit. This is about finding the right situation. He believes it can happen with Texas A&M. They got somebody finally running the offense. It looks like they're going to be competent. If Petrino coming in and running the offense, we'll see. You never close the door on anything. You never know what's going to happen in the future. Heck, we don't know what happens this year. All of a sudden, we might get to the end of the season. If Texas A&M is struggling again, I don't think they will. But you think those Aggie fans that got gobs and gobs of money and plenty of oil money, they're just going to sit back and swallow another 4-8 season with Jimbo Fisher? I don't think so. So don't completely close the door on this one. Remember, he cannot sign until December. Eric Garner, don't close the door on that. So they are looking at a couple of tight ends in this class. Already with Michael Burt, the commitment from him. One other name that is out there right now is Gavin Hoffman from down to the Kansas City area. That is another guy that has been bandied about a whole bunch. So that is something to keep an eye on. A little more on football. As mentioned, coming up this weekend, it's the big Hawkeye event with all the guys that are committed of making their way to Iowa City, along with some of the top prospects that they're looking for the class of 2024. You hope you walk away from this weekend after the next week or so, and that number is up to probably 17 commitments, something like that, 17, 18. I think that's what they're shooting for with the 12 that are currently committed to the Iowa Hawkeyes, and that's what they're really looking for coming out of this weekend. We'll talk about that a little bit more, and of course, recap things for your everydayers coming up next week on what is happening. But I want to continue, and yesterday, also some more Iowa football news. Had an opportunity to hear from a number of the Iowa football players as they had media availability. So, Cade McNamara talking a little bit more about the trip out to California, bringing his wide receivers with him, bringing his tight ends, also bringing along Joey the Bull. That was pretty fun to see. He apparently became the strength and conditioning coordinator while he was out there, and the work that they were able to put in. The thing that stepped out to me, there's two things that Cade McNamara said. He's down to 4% body fat. We know the work that he is putting in, coming off that injury, the chip on the shoulder that he has, losing his job at Michigan, the opportunity that Iowa has this season. You're going to see a completely different one. But the other part is Cade McNamara has never been known as a gunslinger. This is not a guy with a Brett Favre, a Jay Cutler, a Dan Marino type of arm. That is not Cade McNamara's game. He's a guy that is incredibly accurate, something that is great in the Iowa system, and can make some plays up the field. But he is not the guy that is going to go, from one hash mark over to the other side of the field and throw it on a dime 25 yards up the field. That's not, arm strength is not something that you look at and you're talking about some of the top things that he has as a quarterback. That's not at the top of the list. However, he's added a couple of miles an hour to his throw. And in football, where you're looking about 60 miles an hour, that's kind of an average number for a quarterback throwing a football. He had a couple of ticks to that. Those tough throws, cutting through the wind in a November game, up in Camp Randall in October, that can be incredibly important. Great to see the work is being done, and a whole lot of excitement right now for this Iowa football team. We'll talk a little bit more about some of those nuggets coming out from the media availability here in the coming days and weeks on Locked On Hawkeyes. When we come back, I told you we are going to do it this summer, and we finally have a chance today. It's a Throwback Thursday. We are going to talk about my favorite Iowa football team for a myriad of different reasons. We go back 21 years ago to 2002, the Iowa Hawkeyes winning the Big Ten championship, playing in the Orange Bowl, a season of highs, a season of a few lows, but a fun team. That's as we come back here on Locked On Hawkeyes. Along with that, we also talk a little bit more about the portal, and Chris Murray. We'll hear his name called tonight in the NBA draft. We break things down and continue on Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Now, Birddogs, they're these stretchy khaki shorts. They're designed for a slimmer fit through the thigh and leg, and they give you just a great sculpted look. Hey, you're a little chunky like me. It's okay. Still going to look good. Those calves are going to pop. You're going to be having everybody turn your head when you're putting on your Birddogs. They do the exact same thing as the Lululemon, but they fit way better. Better than regular shorts that have that stiff, restricting cotton. They're stretchy. You can move in them. You can go to the gym. You can go to the golf course. You can just be hanging out at home. These are the shorts that you want for this summer. Inventing cloud knit fabric. That's what Birddogs did. That look like khaki, but stretch in a way that makes a slimmer fit without having to sacrifice the movement that you're looking for. And a big thing, hey, it's hot out there. You're here like we are in the state of Iowa, pretty much wherever you are in the country right now on the second longest day of the year. Birddogs, they use anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. And when you make your order, you'll get a free Yeti-style tumbler with that order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You don't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you. Trent kind of back with you once again here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. So as we go and look forward, it's always fun to look back. And maybe this will be a history lesson. Maybe we'll jog some memories here. But throughout the summer months, we're going to, on Thursdays, have Throwback Thursday. We're going to talk about some of my favorite teams. And if you have suggestions, different teams to talk about, certainly hit me up on Twitter at Trent Condon. You can also find us with the Locked On page at Locked On Iowa. Hit me up that way. Tons of different ways to get involved. But I want to go to this. 2002. So, well, I'm 21. So I can drink legally. All right. That makes it a little better, right? At the tailgate, not looking over your shoulder every once in a while. I was a young looking guy. I'm 43 now. I had a baby face. In fact, just saw some pictures from college where I looked like I was about 12. So once I turned 21, all right, don't have to worry, right, about that when you're at the tailgate, make your way to the stadium, those kind of things. So maybe that's a piece. But secondly, the way that season went. So it opens up the year, and Iowa opens up against Akron. Look, it's the Zips. They stink. And I was up 37-0 at the end of the first quarter. And they rolled 57-21. It was just a dominating performance. A little bit of everything in that one. Iowa goes for 376 rushing yards in the game. Brad Banks hits his first 8 passes of the game, a couple of touchdowns to Mo Brown. They're off and running. The following week, they make a road trip to Miami of Ohio. Yes, kids, Iowa played a road game at Miami of Ohio. Ben Roethlisberger was on that Miami team. And Iowa, it was a tough one. With Iowa State looming the following week, perhaps a look-ahead kind of situation, Iowa took care of business, led at 13-10 at the half, went on 29-24. They scored a touchdown, the Redhawks did, with about 5 minutes to play. Iowa gets the ball back after the kickoff, and this was just one of those drives that kind of stuck in your head. We knew the offensive line had a chance to be good. There was a lot of excitement about Brad Banks taking over at the quarterback spot for Kyle McCann. We knew the running back stable was going to be good, but the way they get the football backed up at their own 20, something like that, and they just ate up the clock. I mean, they just ran it down their throat, and they did whatever they wanted down the field. They easily could have punched in another score. It would have looked prettier than the 29-24 victory that the Hawkeyes got. But they win it, move on at 2-0. And then, boy, one of the crappiest games of Iowa football, certainly of the Kirk Ferentz era. 2002 against Iowa State. Kinnick Stadium, under the lights, a 5 o'clock kickoff, just a weird start time. Game was on the deuce. Iowa races out to a 24-7 lead at the half. They are just dominating this Iowa State team. Brad Banks twice in the second half fumbles the ball. Both times in Iowa territory. 29 straight points by Iowa State. And a game where it just felt like Iowa handed it to them. It was not Iowa State doing things, and they did. They made plays. I mean, credit to them. But the 2 fumbles from Brad Banks, he had a sore wrist, I believe it was, or maybe it was a hand injury that he sustained, had it wrapped. There were talk that maybe the wrap was too tight, and that's why he wasn't able to secure the football the same way. Regardless, not only does Iowa lose that game, I lose my wallet in the student section. That sucked. So I was without a wallet. The next morning, I will just say take the sleep out of my eyes and make my way back to Kinnick, hoping, hey, maybe there'll be somebody in security there. Maybe there'll be people cleaning up. No go. Wallet's gone. Walking around. And the area that is now the Children's Hospital, that was a big tailgating lot and a ton of students, and that's where we tailgated for a while before making our way over to Olive Court. And just walking past that area, it looked like a war zone. And I know some changes were made after that, and there was a lot of conversation about this rivalry, how ugly it got downtown that evening. Now, I unfortunately had to go to house parties because I didn't have my ID. I didn't have a wallet, but we made it work and certainly drowned our sorrows after that one, 36-31 Iowa State. The next week, they also get out to a 24-7 lead. This time's against Utah State, though. Come out in the second half. They continue on 24 points in the third quarter in a 48-7 win against Utah State. Really, my only memory of that game was Clinton Solomon late in that game. He made a big time play and 43-yarder, I think it was, as he made a big play up the sideline. Nate Chandler, we got to see him maybe for he did play in the first game against Akron, but extended minutes in that one in a big win. Next up, it's Penn State. Nittany Lions are undefeated. They're ranked 12th in the country. Iowa goes out to Beaver Stadium, and they are running roughshod over this Penn State team. And then the fourth quarter came. It's wild to think about how great this team was offensively, and certainly early in the year, how bad they were on the defensive side. They had two freshmen playing cornerback, and Antoine Allen and Jovan Johnson. Both of them turned out to be outstanding players, but it took a while to get there. It took a long time for those guys to get there, and there were certainly growing pains that happened over the course of that one. Game gets to overtime. There was a funky play, a blocked extra point. Iowa ran that back for two. Iowa cruising along. Looks like they have the easy victory. They're up 35-13. Here comes Penn State. They scored 22 points in the fourth quarter. Overtime, but Iowa gets the win and gets into the AP top 25 after the victory of 4-1 for the first time since 1997. Another game that will be long remembered, and one of my favorite games. Now, one thing I do remember is this was not a well-attended game. The attendance is listed at 68,249 as Iowa welcomes in Purdue for homecoming. There were not that many people there. Now, there are a lot of people that say they were there, and we saw one of the most incredible performances out of Dallas Clark. I mean, this game alone very well could have been the difference maker for him winning the Mackey Award that season. A 95-yard touchdown by Dallas Clark. And it was coming up the sideline, right on our sideline in the old student section where it was. And just seeing him pull away from a safety, from a cornerback, the speed that he showed on that one, I think that play also helped him make some big money at the next level. But the biggest play came late in the game. Fourth down from the Purdue 7-yard line. And Brad Banks rolls out to his left, turns back to his right, chucks it into the end zone, and Iowa gets the win on that one. Still, Purdue got the ball back with a chance to come back, tied up with the field goal, or get the win with the TD. And the name that will go down in infamy, at least in my circles, is Adolphus Shelton. So if you've been with us for a while, you remember last football and basketball season, my buddy Jace, he hops on to the podcast from time to time. Jay said after that one, his firstborn son was going to be called Adolphus. When he had a kid, that was not the case. He skipped out. A liar and a lawyer. Big surprise. Next up is Michigan State. Iowa cruises 44-16. This was the only home game that year that I didn't make it to. My sister was getting married. Yeah, frustration about that one. The defense started to turn the corner. A great performance. They shut down Charles Rogers, the outstanding wide receiver, had a touchdown catch in 14 straight games. That came to an end on that one. Iowa up big in the ball game. They cruise in for a 44-16 win. The next one was kind of a danger spot as they took on Indiana on the road. The reason is looming was a road trip to Michigan. So Michigan on deck. They go to Indiana. Not a good Hoosier team. They came in 3-3 on the season, but Iowa just took care of business. 17 points in the first quarter. Grant Steen was all over the place. He had 3 interceptions in the game. And though Iowa made some errors, frankly, Indiana wasn't good enough. And Iowa gets the win 24-8. Then we go to my first ever big time road trip. And maybe this is another reason that I love this Iowa football team so much. I've been to a lot of games in the Metrodome. Growing up in North Iowa, hop, skip, and a jump. We could get to the Dome in just over 2 hours. We went there a ton. Didn't matter if it was Twins games or if it was Iowa, Minnesota. We were up there a bunch. Been to Madison a couple of times. I have family in Madison, so I've been there. But this was first outside of the, I guess, close area. First time going out and watching the team. We took an old school bus out there. It was a RAGBRAI bus. Had a guy that drove us out there. A bunch of college dudes, I think there was 12 of us on the bus. an incredible time, which should have been, I think, a 9-hour drive, something like that. Turned out to be about 12 hours because the bus, well, it couldn't get over 55 miles an hour. So it took a little bit longer than we anticipated, but we had an incredible time leading up to the game. And then when the game came, oh, how fun that was. It was tight early on, 10-6 at the half. Another Michigan field goal made it 10-9. And then suddenly, here comes Iowa. And more importantly, here comes Jermel Lewis. For a lot of people, you have memories of little Fred Russell out there. In fact, at this game, I got to meet Fred's brother, his older brother, who I towered over. He might be 2-3 inches shorter than Fred is, but had an opportunity to meet their family. Great people. And then the performance that we saw out of Jermel Lewis in a game where Fred Russell was struggling against a team that he thought he was going to be a Michigan Wolverine, and not the case. Brad Banks was outstanding. He found a couple of touchdown passes in the game, also to CJ Jones, used the tunnel screen to perfection. They hand Michigan their worst home loss since 1967. I still have the Ann Arbor newspaper from the next day, and the headline in the kind of fold out section, it doesn't get any worse than that. Iowa into the top 10 for the first time since 1991 with the victory. 34-9. It was domination. And if you go back and see those highlights, you can see me and my buddies and a couple of them. And the celebration was on from that. It's Wisconsin the following week. The Badgers were all right, 6-3. Not a vintage Bucky team. But the defense started to roll for Iowa. Iowa's defense held Anthony Davis, a very good collegiate running back, to 34 yards on 16 rushes. Iowa's defense knocks out Brooks Bollinger and Jim Sorgi. They were all over the place. And one of the most beautiful plays, they've been using that tunnel screen all season long. Really, the first couple of seasons of Kirk Ferentz and with the offensive coordinator, Ken O'Keefe, they had to because of the limitations that they had offensively those first couple of years. But the tunnel screen, the bubble screen, that was a big part of what they did. And they faked it. Dallas Clark shot up the field. Everybody was converging in. He was wide open, a thing of beauty, and Iowa gets the 20-3 win. By the final home game of the season, Iowa's up to number 6 in the country. Northwestern comes in, and they had no chance. We see this offensive line, what they were. We saw the 5 seniors run off the field together, hand in hand. At the end of it, it was a little bit of everything. Fred Russell came back after the hand injury. He went for 100 yards and a 1,000-yard season on that one. Iowa gets their 10th win of the year, 62-10 against Northwestern. Finally, another fun road trip. Back up to the Metrodome I go and my group of buddies, and we had a party in Minnesota. It is a chance to clinch an undefeated regular season in the Big Ten, something Iowa hadn't done in a very long time, depending on what happened with Ohio State later on that weekend, a possibility to go to the Rose Bowl, and that's where we thought we were going. It was a different era. The BCS was becoming a thing in the national championship, which Ohio State ultimately played for and won. But Iowa brings 30, 40, 50,000 fans in, and it was domination. Late in the game, they tried to get Brad Banks in Heisman conversation, tried to get him a touchdown catch. Just missed on that one. An opportunity there. Mo Brown had another touchdown, hits 10th of the season. Iowa, with their 10th straight Big Ten win and their longest winning streak in the Big Ten since the 1920s, in front of the largest crowd ever to see a Gophers game at the Metrodome, 45-21. I went back last summer, as I like to do, and watched this game. It was a little tighter than I expected before Iowa finally pulled it away, but ultimately Iowa gets the win. But what happened afterwards is what many people will believe. So I had front row seats for this game. Back then, Minnesota would limit who could buy tickets for the Iowa-Minnesota game. And one of my buddies had just moved up to Minnesota and moved up to St. Cloud. And as a Minnesota resident, he got first crack at the tickets when they went on sale to the general population with Minnesota addresses. So he got us great tickets. We were right behind the Iowa bench. And one of my good friends from high school was a walk-on on the football team, Will Lack. And I was talking to Will towards the end of the game, and I said, "Do you think we could come on the field afterwards?" And Will just said, I if you do, don't tell me. And so we left it as that, but we hopped down and we were some of the first people on the field. Now we were going to hang back a little bit. We weren't going to rush the field or anything. Well, as we did and being some of the first people, we look over to our right and left and we found out we were not alone. That were a lot of people, a lot of Hawkeye fans had the same idea. So everybody comes storming onto the field. We see everybody starting to make their way to the middle. We do the same. We see out of the corner of my eye, I see a guy get absolutely laid out by a security guard. and kind of had to hop to the side to evade him and get out of the way. We get to the middle, go over to the goalposts. They get pulled down. Then the Metrodome staff is trying to get us out of there. They are playing this just screeching, awful sound. It was a good one. Got interviewed after the game by the local TV station up there, one of the local TV stations up there. My cousin was the first to be interviewed. They could not understand what he was saying. I stepped in his place, and away we go. Iowa is Big Ten champions, and we thought we were going to the Rose Bowl. That turned out not to be the case. It would have been a matchup against Washington State. Instead, the Orange Bowl had a selection after losing Miami, who played in the national championship game, and they selected the Iowa Hawkeyes. So the Orange Bowl against number 5 USC. USC came in probably the hottest team in the country. They were playing incredibly well. They had sustained a couple of losses early in the season. They lost to Kansas State on the road and also lost an early game to the aforementioned Wazoo squad, Washington State. But after that, they ripped off 7 consecutive victories, dominated number 7 Notre Dame, dominated number 25 UCLA, dominated Oregon. It was Washington, all ranked teams on the end of the season. They were playing incredibly well. Of course, Carson Palmer, what he was. This was a loaded team. Iowa, with the long layoff, they had an extra week off because they played the week before Thanksgiving, was the finale back then. An outstanding start. CJ Jones, see you later, as it was called in the broadcast on ABC. But alas, Iowa, too many missed opportunities early in the game. Saw Brad Banks just not look the same. He looked out of sync. The whole team really looked out of sync. And the domination from USC as Carson Palmer was able to pick the defense apart. It was a game that was 10-10 at the half, but the second half, not the case. And really, a lot of domination also happened in that game, in the running game. It was Carson Palmer was good, no doubt. But what Fargas was able to do changed the complexion. Still, 2002, one of my favorites. That Orange Bowl, the trip, they estimated 48,000 Iowa fans were in attendance for that one. It was so fun. And we went for a while. We really did. We'll come back here, put a cap on things as we continue on Locked On Hawkeyes. All right, Trent kind of back with you one final time. Boy, wasn't looking at the clock there, and that was a lot of talk about Iowa football in 2002. But as I said, one of my favorite seasons, if not my favorite season of Iowa football, came in that one. It was certainly timing was a part of it, but absolutely loved that. So as we wrap things up, some news from the portal. Iowa baseball loses and adds. So Sam Hosier is on his way to Maryland, it appears. He entered the transfer portal a couple of weeks ago, and the biggest thing is, well, money. So Iowa and all college baseball teams only have 11.1 scholarships to play with. That means it is a huge rarity that you ever see anybody that is a full ride athlete in collegiate baseball. I have a lot of 25% scholarships, 50% scholarships. There are a few, but in comparison to what we're used to with football and basketball, it's a different conversation. There's some guys that come there and they're getting books, basically. You know, they're going to get maybe a tenth of a scholarship, and that's all that they're going to get. Plenty of walk-ons, including what Sam was, and put his name in the portal. He's been a walk-on. He's been paying his own way, has not had any help scholarship-wise as it pertains to a baseball scholarship. And I was not set up right now very well for the other sports. Football, as it pertains to NIL, it's going well. Always can be better. Donate to the Swarm. That's how you're going to help Iowa get those athletes. But for that, even basketball and women's basketball, those are different levels. Well, those are the 3 that the Iowa Swarm gives money to. Those 3 programs alone right now. And as it gets bigger, maybe baseball will be a part of it. Maybe wrestling, who has their own collective at this point. Maybe softball and track and field, on and on and on. But at this point, it's just not there. And though they have some individuals and some different things and people that have stepped up, it just wasn't enough. Now, another thing is this loss, good player, starter for a team that finished, in the top 32 in the country? I mean, that's pretty dang good. But Gable Mitchell, they believe, is going to be a star. And we saw him come in a lot defensively towards the end of the season at second base. He's your heir apparent, and very well could have been seeing the writing on the wall that Mitchell was going to get more playing time this season. You could see that be a part of it. But the other thing is I was doing incredibly well in the portal in bringing in different pitchers. So we saw ultimately what was their demise was the bullpen. They ran out of arms, and Keaton Anthony could have helped that out. Another player that was suspended, but they've gone out there now and brought in Brant Hogue from Oklahoma State, Reese Buter from Dallas Baptist, And now Anthony Watts makes his commitment today from Creighton, who was at Ankeny and then, Waukee and then Waukee Northwest. Called a number of his games in high school. He was dynamic. He's got a good bite, a real good kind of sinker, if you will, with his pitch. Sits in the mid to low 90s. He is a guy that I think has a real chance. You look at the overall numbers this freshman campaign, not great at Creighton. Still, making 8 starts in the Big East as a freshman, it's pretty good stuff. He is going to be a help. I was going out there and doing a whole lot more. Finally, Chris Murray will hear his name called this evening in the NBA draft. We will hear more on that. I had him targeted to go number 19 to Golden State. Now, Golden State's making moves today with the re-emerging of Chris Paul making his way back out to the left coast with Golden State. But we will have more coverage for you on this one coming up on tomorrow's podcast every day as we have you covered, and we'll dive in a little bit more some of those Iowa football comments that we had. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me today. Always appreciate your time, and thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.